Hi, it's Robin. One comment I frequently see in online discussion about events like the Vintage Computer Festivals is that people wish they could attend, but they live too far away or they can't afford it. I'm fortunate that I'm able to attend VCF Midwest every year, even though it is a 1,000-kilometer or 635-mile journey from where I live in Canada. I'd also love to attend more shows, but it's difficult to justify the time and expense to travel even further or more frequently. So over the last 5 years or so, I've been working towards building up a bit of a retro computer community in my local area. I've been back in contact with some old friends, and also I've made a lot of new friends. There's no delusions of grandeur here that what we're doing is going to be a real substitute for a Vintage Computer Festival, but that's not why we're doing this. It's about sharing our love of retro computers and building community around them. So I'm mainly making this video to share this idea with you and show you what we've been doing in our little corner of the world. It's not to try to impress anyone, but rather to encourage you to look around locally and see if there's opportunity to do something similar where you live. I live in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, which is a fairly small city of about 100,000 people. Even though we're on the Trans-Canada Highway, we're very isolated from the nearest major centers that you might have heard of. Winnipeg, Manitoba is 700 kilometers or 435 miles west of us. Minneapolis, Minnesota is 550 kilometers or 340 miles south across the U.S. border. And our province's capital, Toronto, Ontario, is a ridiculous 1,400 kilometers or 870 miles east and south. You can't just go due southeast, since there's a couple enormous lakes in the way. I mention that to show that I don't live in a major city that would naturally have a big retro computer scene like where the various VCFs are held. We're something like just the 36th biggest city in Canada. In the USA, there's about 330 bigger cities than Thunder Bay. So if we can do this, so can many of you where you are. We named our club the Thunder Bay Retro Computer Club, and I'll be showing some semi-random footage from our meetings for the next bit while I talk. Feel free to borrow the Retro Computer Club name, though you might want to localize it a bit. We first started meeting once a month at the public library back in 2019, since they had free meeting rooms and were open in the evening. Then the human malware thing happened, and when our libraries finally reopened, they cut back drastically on hours and making their meeting rooms available. That gets a big thumbs down for me, but it's worth checking with the libraries in your area in case they still offer free space and reasonable hours, unlike mine. So now we meet at a local board game cafe called Carlitos, and they let us use their back room once a month. They've got tables and chairs and power outlets. That's about all that's necessary for a venue. We bring the extension cords and the power bars, or power strips for you Americans, the computers, and the monitors. And of course, we support our host by buying coffee, snacks, gaming supplies, board games, and whatever else. I highly recommend this sort of arrangement if you can find a local business like this. I've heard of groups in other cities making arrangements with restaurants, especially if they have an extra room for groups that's unused at that time of day, and that way the computer nerds aren't out there scaring away the regular restaurant customers. In general, keeping things as close to free as possible is a very good thing. It makes the group more inviting to people that are just curious about the hobby, and it also avoids the problems that can happen when you have to start trying to collect money from people to pay rental fees. It's pretty easy for resentment to build up when money gets involved and things don't seem fair. As far as finding people to attend, I reached out to fellow computer nerds from way back in my high school and university days, as well as coworkers from more recent years. If there are local geek groups, whether they're coders or tech enthusiasts, probably some percentage of those people are interested in older computers and tech history. There might be locals who are into retro gaming, and usually there's some overlap with computer gaming there. Even if you can just find another person or two, that might be enough to start. We've even had people find us at the meetings, people who are at the library or board game cafe, and we're just curious. And of course, use the internet to help find local people. Facebook is very useful here, or I guess try Craigslist or Kijiji or whatever. I don't know. I'm not here to tell you how to internet, eh? So we've had a lot of great meetings over the last few years. Probably the most memorable one was October 2022, when DJ Schurz appeared at a meeting with a NABU system, and we all learned about it for the first time. This was coincidentally just 6 weeks before all the NABUs started showing up on eBay, and Adrian Black made his first video about it that really blew up. We were amazed that such a system was developed right here in Ontario, and DJ's family was so involved with it, and yet we knew almost nothing about it. There's probably more to say about that sometime, but the main thing I want to talk about in this video is that this past weekend, we, the Retro Computer Club, did our first big public event as we were invited to ThunderCon, which is a local geek culture Comic-Con, and we were asked to put on a retro computer display. Our display is the result of 8 of our club members teaming up together. Our theme was Home Computers in Thunder Bay, late 1970s to the 1990s, and it was intended to capture home computing up until just when it was about to go mainstream with Windows 95 and 98 and widespread home internet use. We wanted to show a wide representative range of computers commonly available and used here in Thunder Bay, so people at the show who used computers back then in that mostly pre-internet era, they would almost certainly see at least one computer that they'd remember, that they used, that they owned. So we had a lot of people checking out our display. We'll just walk around it and I'll go into a bit more detail after. So starting at the left, I brought my Commodore PET 2001N that I've been working on restoring for a while. And I also brought the VIC-20 that I frequently use in my videos. And it was equipped, of course, with the penultimate +2 card. Because our resident Apple expert wasn't able to make it to the show, I brought my Mac SE, though unfortunately the hard drive died, so it was just kind of like a prop. And I also brought my Apple IIc running the arcade machine game creation software, which was fun to check out. Darren of GrewTube brought his Commodore 64C, and there's the bread bin there as well, and his Commodore 128D, and a flat 128 as well, although we only had 2 hooked up at a time. And I'll show more of what he ran on it in a bit. Ken from Canadian Retro Things made the drive to the show, and he brought his TRS-80 Color Computer 3, and also had a couple other machines for display, his Coco 1 and MC10. Unfortunately, his TRS-80 Model 1 was still under repair. Maybe next year. Johnny brought his Pentium 1 with MS-DOS and Windows 3.11. Newfangled stuff. Arcade brought this Timex Sinclair 1000, which I was very happy to see, as that was my first computer ever. Kristen brought her Atari Mega ST2 system, which was very nice. Johnny also brought this Compaq Armada with Windows 95, and that was the newest computer anyone in the group brought. Mike brought his beautiful Amiga 1000, along with an Amiga 1200 and an Amiga CD32 console. And finally, Ed was representing 8-bit Atari with both the Atari 800 XL, which is probably the single most popular model of Atari computer, and the original Atari 800. I did get away from our booth for a while to take a quick tour around the rest of ThunderCon, Apparently, there were about 3,000 people in attendance over the full weekend. We were in the smaller of two buildings, and in between the two buildings was an outdoor area with more vendors. The Retro Computer Club was only there on Sunday. It sounds like Saturday was the much busier day, but that's okay. It's not like I love being in a crowd. So inside the main building, I got to see Jed Reese from Galaxy Quest and Linda Ballantyne, voice of Sailor Moon, both Canadians. Sorry, I forgot to take pictures though. There was lots of stuff for sale, nerdy art, some classic video games that were pretty interesting. There were board games, RPGs, Star Wars stuff, all kinds of things. My favorite booth was the Vinyl Frontier, and they had a great selection of vinyl records. I was excited to find 3 I've been looking for, the soundtracks to the movies 2001: A Space Odyssey, 2010: The Year We Make Contact, and the soundtrack to A Clockwork Orange. So back to our display with some more detail. Darren was writing a program on his Commodore 128 that did some sort of fractal branchy thing. That was pretty neat. That was written in C128 Basic 7. And of course, we loaded up various games on the Commodore 64 and the 128, such as the modern remake of Ghosts and Goblins. And Darren was also doing some playtesting of his upcoming 4-player mini RPG for the Commodore 64. And he got quite a few other people to play along with that. The Penguin dropped by and he considered using his umbrella on my broken Mac to get it working, but ultimately decided against it. As he walked away, he said, "Blue scuzzy." So I better look into that. People brought some various props from back in the day, such as the Commodore 64 User's Guide and the Programmer's Reference Guide. Mike brought this ad from Kmart from 1987, selling the Commodore 128 for $444 Canadian, a 1571 disk drive for $388, and a 1902 monitor for $477. It was great to see that ad from Thunder Bay Mall because that's where I worked, just down the hall at Bandito Video and then Micodon Computers starting in 1988. Ken from Canadian Retro Things had a bunch of games running on his Coco 3, including this cool Rally X type game. It's called Rally SG by Nicholas Marentes from 2020. Ken also brought some other TRS-80 gear like the cute little MC-10 and this cassette recorder. Seems to match in size pretty well. He also demonstrated some of the excellent arcade ports for the Coco 3, such as Robotron. R2-D2 paid us a visit. I think he was especially fond of the Commodore PET. They kind of look the same. At one point, we had the Timex Sinclair 1000 apart as it had developed a partially non-working keyboard, like even worse than usual. The Pentium 1 played a lot of Doom. A very young-looking Deadpool dropped by and played for a bit. Overall, it was very popular with the teenagers. Mike had lots of things to show on his various Amigas. There was SimCity running on the Amiga 1000, Pac-Man running on the Amiga 1200, and this interesting CAD program for the Amiga, Cycus 1.78, that was developed into the late 1990s. Pretty neat to see. We didn't want to only show games, so that's why there were some other programs we had running. Mike also printed up some information sheets for showgoers to see about the Amiga 1000, 1200, and CD32. Just pause the video if you want to look at any of those. There was a Dalek running around the show, and it came by and threatened us.
Welcome to ThunderCon. Your machines are pretty old. We can upgrade them. No, wait, that is the Cybermen. We will just delete everything. No, that is them as well. We exterminate. We will exterminate you all.
I had The Future Was 8-Bits Penultimate Plus 2 running on the VIC-20 in the random mode, and it saw a lot of play. This Pac-Man, aka Jelly Monsters, was very popular, and people actually asked if I had any games on cassette, and I did. So I demonstrated the process for some young people who complain about 10-second loading times. Try 15-minute loading times. Master Chief and Peach walked by our booth at one point. Ed's Atari 800 played Lode Runner for much of the day, and many people tried playing it. And meanwhile, the 800 XL showed several other games, including Demon Attack and the fairly new Prince of Persia port. Ed also printed up some information sheets about the Atari, and again, just pause if you want to look at those. Oh, and I didn't mention the vehicles outside. There is this Ghostbusters station wagon and also a Jurassic Park Jeep. Those are really neat to see. And in fact, the Ghostbusters even dropped by our booth and played their game on the Commodore. Thanks to Darren for this picture. My other friend Mike dropped by and asked if I had Miner for the Pet, which he hadn't played since high school. So I did. We loaded it up and he had a lot of fun. And he actually played a couple really epic games. And we also loaded up Dungeon, another one of our favorites, mutual favorites. So that was great to connect with an old friend and to remember these great old pet games that we grew up playing. Oh, the Dalek went by again.
That's what I said. Thank you. How are you today? I'm supposed to be scary. Why are you smiling at me? Do you wish to be instant? I like you. You will be one of us.
And we also had the classic Space Invaders game running on the Commodore PAT and the Space Invaders clone Avengers on the VIC-20. I now have reason to believe that these were both made by the same programmer from HAL Laboratory in Japan. These two games may be sharing some code and the same author. I think that's pretty neat. So it was really a very fun weekend. It was a good project for our group to collaborate on, and it had the side effect of raising awareness of our group. I expect we'll have more people checking out our group meetings this year. So I hope that maybe inspires you to try to get some sort of retro computer event happening in your area. Even if it's just a few people, it can be a lot of fun, and it may grow from there. You don't know if you don't try. Okay, thanks very much to my patrons for their support. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.